until about the mid-60s, the U.S., the incarceration rate was very similar to other sort of industrial nations in Western Europe. It wasn't a heavily politicized issue. Politicians sort of left crime and punishment issues to the experts. And starting really in the early 70s, especially with Nixon's war on crime and war on drugs, the whole issue of crime started to get very politicized. It happened at the same time that a lot of the urban riots happened in the late 60s and early 70s, and people all of a sudden got scared of crime. It was now used as a political wedge issue, and politicians found that using the crime issue, using the fear of crime issue, was a very successful political issue, especially if you not only stoked those fears, but suggested solutions like harsher sentences, longer prison sentences, and that's what happened. It was a very popular thing to do, to be tough on crime. There was really no movement against being tough on crime, and that manifested itself with huge numbers of increasing sentences, beefed up law enforcement, especially in urban areas. And in urban areas is where you have the bulk of your, minority and people of color. As the war on drugs accelerated, law enforcement is very good at making drug arrests and finding people who deal drugs, especially when you're doing it at a street level in open air markets. And that stuff happens in cities, and so it happens disproportionately that people of color get arrested for that. And then as you increase sentences, they just start to appear in huge numbers in prisons. So it's complicated. There are a lot of things that went into how we got to where we've got. The most sort of, interesting and also depressing thing about it is how quickly we've gotten to where we've gotten. We've ramped up our prison system to the point where, as you say, we lock up a greater proportion of our population than any country on earth, and what we buy from that is certainly less than clear, and we know we get hugely high recidivism rates, so something isn't working. Yeah, I think there's a variety of solutions. If you talk to experts, they'll give you 100 different solutions. The real trick is to somehow get them accepted both by the public and by policymakers. So there's a very robust literature on programs that work to reduce recidivism far more effectively than prison. Severe third strike laws don't work because they just lock people up well past the age when they're going to commit crimes. We know that locking up low-risk drug users and sellers simply makes them worse and turns people who are not a public safety threat into a public safety threat. We know that diverting those folks from prison makes more sense from a public safety point of view, forget about the finances, than locking them up, right? We know that there's a variety of sentencing reform we can do that more accurately targets people's risk and doesn't over-punish people from low risk and appropriately punishes people who are high risk. The real test is getting states to actually do that, and one of the things I talked about is now there are states that are doing that, and some very conservative ones like Texas, like Arizona, like Alabama. There are a lot of states now that you would never have thought would really take this issue on in any kind of a direct way, but they're just not in a position to keep doing what they've done for years, right? More than half people now who leave prison are back in prison in 3 years. We know that everyone who leaves prison, almost 70% of them are rearrested within 3 years, right? Prison is not tamping down the willingness of people to commit crime after they leave prison. And so if you can implement programs that we know work, we know from the literature, right? We're not making this up, then people will be safer. There'll be less crime and there'll be fewer victims. So the knowledge is there. The question is the political will there to really do some of this stuff?